Very good. So, ladies and gents, Professor De Bono, we can't see him, but he should be with us. And all our distinguished guests. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which side of the globe you are currently located. Being environmentally friendly and, as has just been pointed out, reducing our carbon footprint through this virtual conference. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Leonie Baldacchino. I am the director of the Edward De Bono Institute at the University of Malta, and it is my pleasure and honor to be the master of ceremonies for today's event. So on behalf of Professor De Bono and the Palace of New Thinking, I would like to welcome you and thank you for being with us here today. As you know, the aim of this virtual conference is to develop alternative approaches to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. Held under the patronage of His Excellency George Vella, President of the Republic of Malta, and with the support of the European Association of Political Consultants and the De Bono Thinking Systems, this conference marks World Creativity and Innovation Day, which is recognized by the United Nations as an international day of observance to encourage people all over the world to use creativity in problem solving related to the Sustainable Development Goals. And what, ladies and gents, is a larger problem or a greater threat at this present moment than the COVID-19 pandemic, which has disrupted and taken so many lives and led to an unprecedented and previously unimaginable reality that we are living in today. However, as Professor De Bono said in the invitation letter that he sent us, this crisis can also be seen as an opportunity to bring our minds together and design a new, innovative way forward. So before I quickly run through the program and introduce our first speakers, I'd just like to begin with a few housekeeping points, since this is a virtual conference and perhaps new to some of you, perhaps not, but I thought I would mention a few important points. So first of all, please note that the session is being recorded. Okay, so it is being recorded and it might be made available for viewing later on. The second part of the event after the breakout rooms will be streamed live online. We would love to see your faces. Most of you, I appreciate, have your cameras on. However, please keep your microphones muted for as long as possible, unless of course it is your turn to talk, just so that we can minimize background noise and avoid any unintended interruptions. Most of us are doing this from home. I am in my home office in the company of my dogs. One of them is a little bit vocal, so you might at some point hear a bark. So I apologize in advance if that is the case. Some of you might have family members and whatnot, so it's always good to keep the mics on silent, on mute if possible. Just a note about the Zoom layout. At the moment, I believe I've been put on automatic speaker view, so you can see me in the main part of your screen, but I believe you do have the option of going back to the mosaic view if you prefer to see all of the participants on your screen at the same time. So you should have settings on the top right hand of your screen to adjust the layout of your view, of your Zoom view. So now, without further ado, I'm aware that we are on a very tight schedule, so I would like to straight away introduce our first speakers. So our first speaker will be Sepp Hartinger, who is the founder of the European Association of Political Consultants. After him, we will have Justine Kassar-Gaspar, who is the organizer of this conference. Professor De Bono, who really needs no introduction, but I will introduce him as the founder of the Palace of New Thinking, amongst other things, will also give us an address. After that, we have an address by His Excellency George Vella, the President of the Republic of Malta. After that, we will have Chuck Dimer, who is the De Bono Thinking Systems Lifetime Master Trainer, who will give you some background about the De Bono thinking methods. And then it will be briefly back over to me for a very quick overview of the rest of the program. So thank you very much once again, all of you, for being with us. Sepp, over to you.
Thank you for the introduction. Welcome to this conference, and a big thank to all to participate on this conference. I went in Malta mid of February, and we had a long talk with Professor Eda De Bono, what we can do with Palace of Thinking. And some weeks after, the crisis come over Europe, and then we decided to do this project. I think this is a very important project for all of us. And we decided to make a coordination between the PONT group and the group of the European Association of Political Consultants. Because the political consultants, they are advisor to the governments in many cases. And therefore, I think it's very good to have a little bit a strong focus on this topic, and maybe we can find some alternative ideas for this crisis. I think this crisis is the biggest one what we had ever. It's not only about the infected, it's also about the whole economy. I think if the crisis is over, we will have a real strong economy crisis, and this will take time for the next many years. So it's a thing what we have to work and do a little bit more also in the future for that. So thank you to all for joining us, for being with us. Thank you, Mr. De Bono. It's a great pleasure to work with you. It's our first time. And I hope that EAPC can work more often with PONT, with the Palace of Thinking, Palace of New Thinking in the future. So thank you to Mr. De Bono. Also, thank you to Justin. We did a lot of work together during the last 3 weeks, and it was a pleasure for me to work. Thank you. Leonie, it's your part now.
Okay, so I would now like to introduce Ms. Justine Casar-Gaspar, who will also give us a brief opening address.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I mean, Sepp has already said most of it. I mean, we are here today because I think a little bit over 3 weeks ago, I was planning and trying to organize the next conference for the Palace of New Thinking. I was in discussion with Sepp, whom I'm very glad to have met through a friend of mine. So I'm glad to know you, Sepp. And basically, all of a sudden, I couldn't, plan the organization anymore because we couldn't make a conference. So everything stopped. And then the next day I said, okay, we have the biggest global issue in our face, because this is what Palace of New Thinking is about, to find new ideas for world issues. So then from then on, with a matter of few days, you can say a little bit over 2 weeks, we're all here. I'd just like to say that I'm really thankful and I'm very appreciative of everyone's support. I mean, the response has been overwhelming, almost, too much to handle. And I'm very sorry that we have some people who wanted to be a part of this, but we had no more space. We were fully booked. So hopefully from this conference, we will have more to come. We're thinking of going on, maybe even on national level with national governments after this. So today we are discussing it, on a global level. And after this, we hope that if there are certain countries maybe who are also new to COVID, that we can help them out by them having, Palace of New Thinking assistance and support to help them with new ideas for the issues that they face. So of course, I thank also Dr. Edward De Bono, who is my mentor, who helps me do what I do on his behalf. And I hope that we have really good results from this conference, and I'm sure that we will. So thank you. Thank you all. I really appreciate your support.
Thank you, Justine. And we will now pass the mic to Professor De Bono.
EAPC members, PONT participants, moderators, expert panelists, and thank you, His Excellency George Vella, for your patronage of PONT, the Palace of New Thinking, and thinking about the COVID-19 crisis. Thank you, Justine, for organizing it. Special thanks to Sepp Hartinger for his collaboration with PONT to help make this conference happen. Thank you, Susan McLennan, DBTS, for providing the moderators for this conference. Thank you to all my global master trainers who teach my work, those here and at home. Thank you, Dr. Leone, for your work with the Edward de Bono Institute. I hope to see new results in the focuses that PONT has prepared for alternative approaches to COVID-19. The importance of thinking. Thinking is somewhat important. Mostly we regard the purpose of thinking is to analyze the situation, to recognize something familiar, and to apply the familiar approach. There's nothing wrong with that, it's just insufficient, inadequate. That is a perfectly reasonable use of thinking, but by no means the only one. So we need to do more thinking. And thinking is to provide alternatives, so that not only do we know what we might do, but we know alternatives. It doesn't mean the usual approach is wrong. No, we have to identify the usual approach and think about using it. But we also want to go beyond that to new approaches, perhaps more powerful approaches, perhaps approaches which apply here and do not usually apply elsewhere. So thinking is all about new thinking. New thinking. It's the old thinking as well. There's nothing wrong with the old thinking, but in addition, new thinking. It's all like in a motor car. You have some gears, they're fine, but then you have extra gears. It's not instead, it's as well. So we need new thinking as well as standard thinking. So I hope you find time to do some thinking in tackling this particular issue of the COVID crisis. And I wish you all every success, and may your ideas grow, germinate, blossom, develop even further ideas. There's nothing wrong with thinking. One purpose of thinking is to recognize standard situations and apply standard answers. That's perfectly fine, nothing wrong with that at all. It's just insufficient. We also need to look at things, see them differently perhaps, find new answers, different answers, further answers as well. It's not instead of anything we do, but as well. So I wish you all success in your thinking and applying it to this particular situation. It's possible to think about it and to develop new approaches, new ideas. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor de Bono, and thank you for the initiative to organize this very interesting virtual conference. And now,
esteemed participants, welcome to this virtual conference on alternative approaches to COVID-19 global management. I have to start by thanking Professor de Bono for the invitation to address you all today in the framework of this initiative of the Palace of New Thinking, with the aim of generating new ideas to address the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a very delicate juncture for the international community as we face one of the most trying times in our lifetime. I gladly gave my patronage to this initiative, as we need to introduce some fresh and creative thinking to this whole issue and the multifaceted impacts it is bound to have on our lives and possibly also those of the next generation. Life as we know it has changed and do not have any certainties as to what it would look like when the worst is over. This uncertainty goes far beyond fears for our health. As businesses have closed or slowed down to find the transmission of COVID-19, financial concerns and job losses are one of the first human impacts of the virus. This has naturally destabilized the well-being of our families and society more broadly. It has created tensions and bred deep concerns. Not knowing what the impact of this pandemic will be affects our economic, physical, and mental well-being. What is certain is that the structures we have invested in, developed, and relied upon for decades have proved not to be enough. The innovative approaches you will be discussing shortly could hopefully go some way in identifying alternative methods of international cooperation and on decisions taken at national levels. In the midst of this global disarray, solidarity and cooperation need to prevail over confusion and fear. The fact that you constitute a global audience is a very encouraging sign that the ultimate drive to unite in the face of adversity is still uppermost in our minds. We are all aware that no one individual country can do this alone. I note that amongst the themes you will be discussing in the coming hours, there is a very valid question as to the balance that needs to be struck between the national and supranational levels. I do not think any set parameters can be vouched for. Every country has its own particular set of circumstances. Let me take Malta's example. All levels of representation and governance have come into play, from the World Health Organization, the European Union directives and support mechanisms, to government decrees down to local council notifications and hands-on action. This very much depends on the case at hand, and there is no one model that can be automatically transposed from one country to another. One effective tool we could resort to very early on was to observe the way the virus spread in our neighbors and in other countries. Identified patterns and extracted lessons learned. The sharing of information between governments was essential as from day one. In fact, what I find most evident in the present situation is the strength and the value of information, especially through social media and the modern methods of communication. A tool we have come to undervalue along the years and focused instead on might and money. The one overarching way in which to combat the spread of this virus is the dissemination of accurate information as quickly as possible. Equally crucial was the response to incorrect information, to misinformation, and to fake news, and the activation of appropriate mechanisms to keep the public, media, and stakeholders informed on an ongoing basis. I find the point on alternative communication strategies in your program as very adequate, and I'm sure the government and health authorities worldwide would benefit from this discussion and from the proposals that could come out of this debate. Alongside information, I think technology is the next best tool we have at hand to address and possibly mitigate or reverse the effects that the virus will bring on our societies and economics. Never before have entities, big or small, that work in the sector of technology innovation been more important than they are right now. Over a matter of weeks, we have seen an unprecedented, almost immediate intensification of cooperation and cross-fertilization of ideas, which we did not imagine possible only a few months ago. This comes as another lesson learned. In the long term, the international community and individual governments will need to invest more heavily in innovation techniques. We simply cannot even remotely risk that the world comes to a standstill. In many cases, it is thanks to research and technological innovation that companies continue to operate and deliver products, services, and solutions. The engine somehow is still running. In one of the addresses I delivered to the people of Malta to give them hope and encouragement, I pointed out that this virus has placed us all in the same boat. There are no social classes, educational, professional, or cultural category that is spared. Even though at this stage, questions do arise as to why 80% of infected persons are symptomless, while males are more infected than females, and why children appear to be practically immune. Also, why is it that there seems to be a predilection for developed urban concentrations? We are all equal human beings, and we are all exposed to one and the same danger. It is very much an existential wake-up call that the artificial differences we perceive or have purposely created mean just nothing. even as statistics remain disheartening, economic hardship becomes more tangible, and the feelings of anger and loneliness become ingrained, we should not lose sight of the good that has emerged from this global tragedy. Social distancing, lockdowns, and the lack of human interaction have prompted an unprecedented sense of altruism, of solidarity, and care because of the realization that we are all in this together. We witness the positive effects on the environment, especially on air quality. We have learned lessons on crisis management. We should be rethinking whether it is wise to rely on globalization of production of essential products. What shape will the nature of work practices take after COVID-19 is over? And how are we expected to react to it? Will Skype and Zoom diminish the need for jetting around the globe for international meetings by executives, politicians, and academicians? On these encouraging thoughts, I would like to conclude these welcome remarks by once again thanking Professor De Bono and Mr. Sepp Hartinger for this opportunity to address you and wish you every success in your deliberations. Above all, I wish you and your families well-being and good health. Thank you.
Okay, once again, with thanks to His Excellency the President for that opening address and very encouraging words as well, as far as creativity and creative thinking and innovation are concerned, and their role in dealing with this pandemic. So now I would like to invite and introduce Chuck Dimer for his participants' overview of what's going to take place during the breakout rooms and some background about the De Bono thinking methods. Chuck is a lifetime master trainer on the De Bono thinking methods. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, Leonie, and good afternoon, everyone. And to those of us on the side of the Atlantic, good morning. Dr. De Bono, when he was doing postgraduate studies at the University of Cambridge, used as the basis of his research the pulmonary system, or the lungs. And what was driving that research was an answer to the question, how do the lungs know how to do what they do? Where do the lungs get their instruction set to take in oxygen and expel carbon dioxide? And as he was gathering data for his intensive research, he was putting it into an IBM 360 computer on the campus of the University of Cambridge. And he became fascinated with the difference between cyber intelligence and human intelligence. And that drove Dr. De Bono to a very different question. And that question was, how does the human brain know how to do what it does? Where does the human brain get its instruction set? And he came up with a theory that was really quite novel at the time, a theory that has since been proven accurate, that the human brain makes patterns. And that is a marvelous thing, because if the human brain did not make patterns, we would have to relearn everything every day. But fortunately, I don't have to remind myself or think about how to use the toaster in my kitchen. I don't have to think about how to make coffee. I don't have to think about how to get to this office where I am right now. The human brain makes these marvelous patterns so that the brain doesn't have to think anymore about certain things, so that it can think about other things. So it's a wonderful system with this one problem. Once we've established patterns, we often get stuck in them. And Dr. De Bono said, if that's the case, we'll never get any new ideas. And as he said in his talk this morning, that thinking really is all about new thinking. It's creating different patterns. It's trying to break out of the existing patterns that we're in, or else we're forever condemned to remain in them. So Dr. De Bono devised a series of marvelous tools to help us break out of the patterns of both our thinking and our behavior. And those tools include things such as lateral thinking. They include tools such as the power of perception tools tools such as considering when we think about other people's points of view, considering all of the factors and not just a few of the ones that we're more inclined to think about. It includes things such as worrying about not only now, but in the future. If I make a decision now, what happens next month, what happens next year, what happens 10 years from now? And although these things may sound very obvious, we forget to do them. And what we do instead is we follow our normal patterns of thinking. So this marvelous tool set helps us to break out of our patterns and come up with new, more powerful and more effective patterns. And in addition, there's one other tool, my favorite tool, and that happens to be the 6 Thinking Hats tool. And the 6 Thinking Hats is a tool that we will be using today when we get into our breakout sessions. And it's a tool that helps us get beyond the confusion and the complexity of thinking so that we can help deal with topics such as the coronavirus. This is what Dr. De Bono has done, and we'll be using the 6 Thinking Hats today, as I mentioned. The 6 Thinking Hats will help us stay on focus, and we have a variety of focuses today. Another important fact of the 6 Thinking Hats is it employs a technique Dr. De Bono calls parallel thinking. In parallel thinking, what we do is we work on aspects of thinking together. We really harness our brains as a team and help solve problems more effectively and more quickly. So what we're going to do with the 6 Thinking Hats is tame our egos so that instead of arguing with each other, instead of trying to demonstrate that my ideas are better than your ideas or my ideas are right and yours are wrong, what we're going to do instead is work together to solve a major issue, and that is the COVID-19 virus and its effect on the global community as well as local communities. So it is thanks to Dr. Edward De Bono and all of the tools that he's developed that the Palace of New Thinking exists, that PONT is here, that the Edward De Bono Institute exists. And using Dr. De Bono's tools, perhaps we could look at the COVID virus in a very different way. And have a little slide that may demonstrate what possibilities might exist if we use some of these tools. So consider that if you don't mind. A different way, a different perspective of looking at COVID. And I would like to turn this meeting back to Dr. Leone Baldacchino. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. Thank you.
I just started to thank you without turning my mic back on. So yeah, thank you very much, Chuck, for that introduction. A very brief but very interesting overview of some of what Professor De Bono has done and some of the ways in which we can use his work. And I'm sure that the breakout sessions that will follow this introductory plenary are going to be extremely interesting, and I look forward to hearing the ideas at the end of it. So before breaking out, just to let you all know that there will be 5 focus areas that we will be generating ideas on. These will all be under the expert guidance of the De Bono Master Trainers. So the first focus area is management of the current crisis, which will be moderated by Chuck, who you have just all met. The second focus area is the availability and adequacy of healthcare, which will be moderated by Nicola Tyler, who is also a DBTS Master Trainer. The third focus area is how to ease the effect on the economy, which will be moderated by James, or as his friends call him, Pat Carlisle from the USA, also a DBTS Lifetime Master Trainer. The fourth focus area is independent thinking, which will be moderated by Donna Patch, also a Master Trainer. And focus area 5 is practicality, acceptance, and action, moderated by Stephanie Butland, DBTS Master Trainer. So You will now automatically be assigned to the breakout rooms, but before you head off, please just another few housekeeping rules now, if you like. So I would like to ask you to please keep your phones and emails switched off. We will be running on a very tight schedule and we really need your full focus and attention for especially these breakout areas. We need your minds, your brains to be working to generate new ideas. In terms of being on time, you will be having a timer reminding you every 15 minutes how much time is left. So that will help keep you on track. And as Chuck said, please bear in mind that the main aim of the session is to generate new ideas, not to push forward any preconceived ideas, any pre-existing knowledge, any pre-existing opinions. So please try to leave those out by the virtual door before you go into the breakout rooms, and try to approach this with as much of an open mind as possible, and let yourselves be guided by the master trainers who are very experienced in this. And you will see that the de Bono thinking tools will really work to give you new ideas. So I look forward to meeting you back here in the main room in an hour's time. Over to you. Thank you. Well, welcome back to the main conference participants, and greetings to those of you who are joining us now on our live video stream. For the benefit of those of you who are joining us now, my name is Leonie Baldacchino. I am the director of the Edward de Bono Institute at the University of Malta, and the Master of Ceremonies for today's virtual conference, which is an initiative of the Edward de Bono Palace of New Thinking under the patronage of His Excellency George Vella, President of the Republic of Malta, with the support of the European Association for Political Consultants and de Bono Thinking Systems. This conference marks World Creativity and Innovation Day, which is recognized by the United Nations as an international day of observance to encourage people to use creativity in problem solving related to the Sustainable Development Goals. And the aim of this virtual conference is to develop alternative approaches to one of the most pressing problems that the world is facing at the moment, which, as you probably know, is the COVID-19 pandemic. During the first part of this conference, our invited delegates participated in creative thinking workshops moderated by the de Bono Thinking Systems master trainers, and generated ideas related to five focus areas. The first focus area was management of the current crisis, moderated by the de Bono Master, the Thinking System Lifetime Master Trainer, Chuck Dimer. The second focus area was the availability and adequacy of healthcare, moderated by Nicola Tyler. The third focus area is how to ease the effect on the economy, moderated by James, also known as Pat Carlyle. The fourth focus area is independent thinking, moderated by Donna Patch. And the fifth focus area was practicality, acceptance, and action, moderated by Stephanie Butland. All of these are master trainers from the de Bono Thinking Systems. So now I would like to invite Nicola Tyler, who shall showcase some of the ideas that were generated in each of these breakout sessions, after which we have an expert panel discussion where we shall discuss if and how some of these ideas can actually be developed and implemented for a better future, to design a way forward. So Nicola, over to you.
Thank you, Leonie, and thanks everybody for a marathon thinking session. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share my screen and whiz through some of the captured ideas. As we go through them, I will invite the moderators of each section to expand on the idea, and if there is one particular person in any breakout room that wanted to give further explanation, then that's what we'll do. So if you will allow me to share my screen. Here we go. Hopefully you can all see. So as Leonie just mentioned, we had 5 breakout rooms, one focused on the current crisis, one on healthcare, one on the economy, one on independent thinking, and the other on practicality and acceptance. So in breakout 1, which essentially was Chuck's group, we came up with 3 ideas. One was the suggestion that we change the data protection laws and have coordinated data on a global level. So this would be an international piece of legislation, probably at the UN level, to involve the use of data. The second one was more flexible structures and a common understanding of when normal is no longer relevant. That would be a potential structure that superseded some laws and behaviors, and the suggestion that there's a crisis team at every level, knowing who the members are, and pardon the typo, and use clean data to focus and target on hotspots. And then the third one was perhaps, as Chuck mentioned, more of a concept than a specific idea, which was around the notion of fear and the role that the media are playing in promulgating fears at a social level, and potentially using, in de Bono terms, red hat comments within white hat news. So it was almost trying to mandate the media to avoid fear mongering. Chuck, I don't know if you wanted to add any comments on that one?
Nicola, I think some of the participants may want to add some more information, particularly on item number 2. But yeah, I think that was a very good summary. And this whole notion of media using clickbait, if you will, rather than white hat information so that people can stay informed.
Is there, if there's a particular participant that wanted to expand on the second idea, I don't know if anyone could raise their hand. Is there anybody willing and able?
Can I just say something on 2, just to give a bit of backcloth to it? We felt that there's often a lag between a recognition that things have changed to the abnormal from the normal, and that we would need to draw on some better, newer thinking around, for instance, the use of artificial intelligence, better metadata, in order to signal that shift, signal that change earlier. And I think it was Sep's comment about having structures that cut across the normal silos. So for instance, in the case of governments, you would involve the opposition in decision making, or at least consultation, in a way that normal procedures in politics doesn't involve them.
Right. Yeah. I remember Edward, when he spoke about in simplicity, he said having a department of simplicity which should stand independent of the typical political structure, and their job would be to bring simplicity into the governance models rather than be attached to it politically. So it's almost like a parallel structure that was bipartisan. Would that be fair, Douglas?
Yeah, I think so, and I think we more or less agree that one of the critical things is that normal, which is the sort of the stuck state of thinking, works for 99% of the time, but we needed something, whether it be a parallel simplicity organization or something like that, that could trigger lots of action much earlier because of a belief of the change from normal to abnormal.
Got it.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Douglas.
Can I just add, I think that reflects on number 1 as well, that when you're into the data protection laws, you might have those that exist for 99% of the time, but when you're into the abnormal state, or whatever we call it, then that clicks in number 1.
Mm. It's also, I mean, there's a great technique also. It's strangely, it's in the simplicity course. It's called bulk and exception, which is something Edward talked about in simplicity. It's like you would treat bulk things in a particular way, but exceptions differently. Thanks, Kevin. Let's move on to, just in the interest of time, let's move on to the second breakout. That was the one that I facilitated, and we were solidly pushed for time. We actually, because the topic is so broad, we said, how do we improve the availability and adequacy of healthcare? And interestingly, I mean, a fantastic idea, and I'd love this to be expanded on from someone in the group, but the concept of thinking like an insurance company came out, which I thought was a super concept, and it's prepare before it occurs. And I'm sure you all remember the Ron Barbaro story that Edwards frequently shared, where he came up with the provocation, you die before you die. Is there anyone in the group that would like to just expand on that thinking?
Yeah, I think it was my thought. And
is that Torbjörn?
Yeah, Torbjörn, yes.
I got it.
if there were...
Finally.
if money was not a problem, but the problem is not really money, it is time, because everything ran out and the workers got sick. So you have to have a minimum level of preparedness in every country before. And looking, if you own a car, you're obliged, at least in Sweden, to have an insurance, because when you crash, it's too late. And you have to think about this in like a pandemic preparation sense as well. But might be hard to get there, but I think that's the only way to actually learn from our mistakes this time.
Okay, it's a great idea. It also sparked a little bit of creativity around maybe companies that produce anything like a vaccine or PPE would be mandated to produce it. There would be no option. So if you were in the manufacturing industry and you produced any kind of PPE, at the point of a pandemic, you became obligated to produce. And perhaps you could even insure against that production need. I'm sure someone will come up with an idea for us. The other idea here was make it illegal to hoard PPEs. It was the concept that people are sort of trading and trumping each other when it comes to the procurement of PPEs. So they said introduce a global or an international law that made it illegal to hoard any PPEs that might be required in a pandemic. And then the third idea was to come up with a set of UN rules for pandemics. We even had an idea of maybe having a European version of the World Health Organization. But this was a suggestion that there's a set of UN rules for how to deal with pandemics. They didn't necessarily address the current availability, other than perhaps we could legislate against the hoarding of PPEs on a global level. So that was group 2. In group 3, and we're going to invite Pat's team to contribute here, but group 3 was focusing on how to ease the effects on the economy. And one of the big ideas that came out of this session was that organizations and banks need to reorganize themselves now for the future, assuming that the future involved incidents and experiences like a pandemic. So I don't know if anyone from Pat's group would like to expand on that.
I mean, maybe I can say a few words. Hi, this is Reza from Germany. One idea out of many was that, for example, organizations could make it possible for the employees to use home office. Just one idea.
Organizations make it possible for employees to use
work from home. Yeah.
And any other ones?
Yes, there is another one. So we are in a very bad mood at the moment. So everyone is thinking, how do we stop this? But we need to change our solution method. We can tell how are we gonna live with this. So if we learn to live with a pandemic, then the economic effects would be minimal.
So that's almost like changing the direction of thinking to say we're trying to solve the problem. So instead of trying to solve the problem, learn to live with the problem. I think it's the Russian TRIZ model that says the solution to the problem lies within the problem. So if we live with it, then potentially economic effects become less significant.
Yes.
It also begs the idea that maybe we need some new economic models or new models for thinking about economics. Whoops. Get some lateral thinking into the departments of economics and maybe the banks. Okay, thank you very much. So that was Pat's group. Breakout 4, this was Donna's group. And Donna, I'll run through them, and I know you've got a couple of comments to add here. So Donna's group redefined the focus, and they said, how might we make independent thinking, and pardon my accent, de rigueur, especially in crisis mode? So the first suggestion here was that we'd have a lifeguard organization or a body that will be able to replicate good case studies per the individual country or regional experiences. The second idea was to create a fearless global citizen movement, mostly engaging young people. So I would say send out the young people and into the fields. And then the third one is setting up an independent body that includes large organizations and countries that would also monitor objective information. And the concept here is that they would be very diligent in following fake news and promoting trust. And I think you actually said truth, Donna. I think that was my typo. Do you want to jump in and add anything there? Donna?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great.
No, actually, it's not a typo.
Oh.
I'm in fact promoting trust, which only comes through the belief in truth. So trust and truth really go together, like they're two fingers of the same hand. And we were also looking at, within the convergence and divergence of this last part of our session, I was looking at also included certain models, like, for example, the EAPC code of conduct within this organization, within this independent body. And their code of conduct, if you look at their website, does include something which, number one, if I'm not mistaken, includes transparency. Is that right, Seb? In the independent body. Huh?
Yeah. So get the EAPC code of conduct or a similar one.
As part of the model of the codes of conduct for this independent body.
Okay.
We will need to have a code of conduct.
All right. So let's just recap before we do the last one. So we've got some super ideas here, some around data, some around structures, some around communication. We've got some out-of-the-box thinking about being more proactive and setting up sort of global. You can almost see how some of these ideas are starting to overlap, like the UN rules and the global body. Getting organizations to restructure and reorganize themselves, being future fit for if this ever happened again. Learning to live with a pandemic rather than trying to fight a pandemic. And that's a great topic for a whole thinking session on its own.
Yeah.
And then this sort of concept that we'd have structures and organizations movements, global movements, and mobilization of people and institutions that would drive certain types of behavior. And then last but not least is Stephanie. And Stephanie had practicality, acceptance, and action. And the three primary ideas that came out of there was set up an open source information portal, which will be a think tank with citizen and expert input. The second idea was to mobilize existing platforms such as Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, etc., and use those existing platforms to encourage the exchange of ideas and expertise. So basically, this is a concept around leverage what exists in terms of data, perhaps even moving into the space of AI. And then I love this idea, co-video. Co-video, a co-video educational resource, a global resource for universal messaging, which is a two-way process where citizens can receive and also contribute ideas and thinking. So Steph, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think first of all, I'm very grateful to my group who thought so effectively during that hour. We kept coming back, I think, to this theme of, you know, we're all human and we're all experiencing the same thing, and the way that we utilize the experience of this time needs to be a universal response rather than kind of place by place. And so yeah, I'd say that, and then I'd invite maybe someone from the group wants to say more about our open source portal. Don't know if it. No? Okay. Yeah, so in terms of the open source portal, I think what we were really thinking about is, can we create an international authority? Can we create a place? And as I listened to the contributions from the other groups and the way that we're all kind of talking about our awareness of information and our concern about truth, I think it was really important with number one that we're looking at an international authority in terms of where the information is coming from. Okay. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add.
Can I add something? The whole perception of truth, though, isn't truth subjective? You know, that's the whole issue about truth and Plato, and that there's a fundamental flaw in the definition of truth and also the definition of normal. My background is in the travel industry, and at the moment the travel industry are busily trying to swan-like, just waiting for things to get back to normal, not realizing that actually it wasn't normal, it wasn't sustainable anyway. It's not sustainable. And as someone's already said, that we should use this pandemic, this situation, this problem, which isn't a problem, it's a challenge, and learn from it on a global level. And all that it has done is that it's just brought everything up to the surface, which the issues which really need addressing, and some of them are quite fundamental. It's interesting with I think it was Breakout 3 that was talking about the banks. Now in the UK, the banks have been given an awful lot of money to help private business, but they've kept it. They're sort of, it's trickling out, but basically they've kept it just like they did in 2008, and they're going to give it to the bonuses, so they're going to keep. So you've got the fundamental value issue there, that you've got to have organizations which dictate to banks, which won't be dictated to, about how to behave. And I think this is the issue with these global bodies, the citizen and expert input and things like that, and getting people to coordinate. There's an awful lot of politics involved, and for them to actually identify what is the normal, realign their value sets, and also, as I said, to understand what is truth, because they have very different perceptions of what their truth is, what their normal is.
Is that Sarah speaking?
Yes.
You've read so many Edward books now.
I have, I'm sorry. Like sort of like, as soon as you said truth, I went, Plato. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. So, I mean, yeah, those are really super points. So we've got at least 15 ideas. The question is always what to do with a great idea. And I know we're going into a panel discussion where a team of experts will be able to comment on some of these. But just to sort of bring this to a close, Edward often talks about ideas that are both visionary and viable. A visionary idea is, does it help facilitate a better future? Is it visionary and something that has not been done before? Is it also feasible and possible? And then viability is around the practical application, which speaks somewhat to Sarah's comment around, could this actually be implemented with relative ease and potentially have a large scale impact or upliftment? So maybe it's worth considering the sort of the visionary viable concept. And for those of you that haven't been exposed to 6 value medals, it's a fantastic book and a framework actually that Edward developed, which when you consider ideas, you'll find that businesses tend to go for the organization value. It's where where does the money sit? But there are other ways of looking and considering value in an idea. And one value, which has obviously become extremely prominent now with COVID-19, is the human value. What impact and contribution does this idea have on people? And we're talking very sensitively now about people's lives. The other one is around quality, which you might also talk around sustainability and endurance. The steel medal looks at the strength of an idea. Think of the tensile strength of steel. The glass medal would look at the novelty, not the novel coronavirus, but the novelty of an idea. And is there a level of uniqueness that might create contagion in a positive sense, that sort of viral contribution? The 5th one is the wooden medal, which is around environment. And environment isn't necessarily about sustainable development, but the environment could be a green zone, the environment could be a workplace, the environment could be a country, a region, a continent, a community. So environment is beyond, woods and air. And then the last one, which is very interesting, is around perception. And Edward talks about how important perception actually is. And he calls it the bronze medal because he said it's very close to the color of gold, but yet is distinctly different in terms of its value and its properties. So this might be around the value of the brand, but brand doesn't have to be a Pfizer or a Shell. A brand could be a country, a brand could be a community, a brand could be a product. So this is a very interesting way of maybe considering ideas into the future. And obviously we've all had, in a very short period of time, a relatively limited exposure to some of Edward's tools and concepts. And just to come back to what Chuck mentioned at the beginning, there are the tools of lateral thinking. I use the technique provocation. You've heard a few people talk about concept extraction. There are other tools like random input and challenge. He also talks about the power of perception. And in the power of perception, which is really a summary of 10 tools, where Edward's original curriculum was based on 60 lessons of thinking, which was originally designed for education. And the power of perception takes some of those tools and puts them into a fantastic packet to help people think very creatively and innovatively, but also in evaluating options and coming up with alternatives and making decisions. And then Chuck came up with that superb acronym at the very beginning of our session, where he said maybe we can talk about COVID as being changes and challenges. the O being opportunities and options, the V being vision and values, the I being innovation and inspiration, and the D being decisions and direction. So to close the session, I thought I'd actually read to you from Sir Petition, a very short paragraph, which maybe if we'd all read back in, I think it was 92, when Edward first wrote this book. He was talking about strategic planning. So he says there was a time when strategic planning was much in vogue. People used to plan with great formality where a company should be in the future. Strategic planning fell into disfavor when the future refused to play the role assigned to it by the planners. The sheer unpredictability of the future, the rapid rate of change, the instability and positive feedback loops in nonlinear systems made a nonsense of planning. At best, there had to be a sort of rolling strategic plan with reassessments almost every week. So on that note, Sir Petition, I would personally like to thank you all for your contributions to the thinking sessions, the fabulous ideas. And we are going to hand back to Leonie, who will be facilitating the panelist Q&A. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Nicola.
Pleasure.
Yep, James, are we back in? Yep, I think we're back. Okay, well, Nicola, thank you very much. What can I say? So many great ideas in such a short time. I don't know, I suppose that goes to show, you know, that the value, the power of the de Bono thinking methods to come up with new ideas and new solutions, and also, if I may say, the expertise and the skill of the de Bono thinking systems master trainers in actually stimulating that creative thinking. You only had such a very short time, and yet you came up with a wide range of very interesting ideas. And yet, at this present stage, that is all they are. They are ideas. And now the next stage is, or the next challenge really, is to see whether any of these ideas can, at any point or in any way, be developed and implemented and even communicated to the people in charge in order to actually see them put into practice. And to do so, we have an expert panel made up of a number of experts from different backgrounds. I'm conscious of time, so I will not go into their full bios, but I invite you all to have a look at the conference website where there are their full biographies, but I will introduce them very briefly and thank them in advance for their participation in this expert panel. So first we have Sepp Hartinger, who is the founder of the European Association of Political Consultants. I will ask him to tell us more about this association in a few moments' time. We also have Professor Kevin Warwick, who is Emeritus Professor at the Universities of Reading and Coventry. His areas of expertise include artificial intelligence, biomedical systems, robotics, and cyborgs. We have Safa Al-Ashar, who is an educational development consultant from Jordan and a fellow of the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Rinus Tochelovsky, who is a highly experienced political consultant. Dr. Galfen Samve, who is an expert in political communication. Dr. Christopher Barbara, who is the clinical chairperson for the pathology department at Mater Dei Hospital in Malta. So he is one of the key players in our island's current fight against COVID-19. So on behalf of the Maltese population, thank you, Dr. Barbara, for your hard work on this front. And also Naib Abida, who is a senior consultant in digital economy. So welcome to this panel discussion. The aim of this discussion now is really to try to pick up on some of the ideas that were proposed to see which are possibly the most appealing and the most feasible perhaps, and how we can take them forward and communicate them to the people to the right people in the right places to see them actually a part of the design of our future. So this is an open question to all of the panelists. You were listening to the ideas overview given by Nicola. Were there any of these that perhaps stood out more than others? Any one or any two of these ideas that you think would be best to start to develop further in the here and now? Any one of our speakers, please?
Yes, let's start.
Thank you.
I have to say thank you to everyone who joined us and comes up with good ideas. I think we have now 15 ideas, but we need a little bit more content of every idea. Then we can publish this. So now that's more or less deadlines. But I feel there are a lot of excellent things into what we can use. The question is, how can we go forward? How can we make a little good content that includes all our doubts? This is the most important thing.
Okay, thank you, Seb. Since I have you in the main frame, can you maybe tell us a little bit about your association? What is it that you are involved in, and perhaps how can you contribute to turning any of these ideas into reality?
Yes, there's one what we discussed in my group, that is to having crisis teams on every level. It's not only on national level, it's also worldwide. I think that some ideas goes together. If we have rules in the United Nations, we need new rules on European level, and then we can break down to the municipal. I think we need crisis teams not only for COVID-19, we need crisis teams also that we are prepared for the future. But these 15 ideas, I'm not sure how we can handle this, that we get more content, more detail.
Thank you, Steph.
Could I say, one of the key points which seemed to come out from several of the slides that we saw is the idea that decisions are made internationally, a new set of UN laws or international regulations that we abide by. Now, we know that 99% of the time, national governments are okay to run things. That's how, but we're in this 1% of the time when it looks like they're not. And yet they're still trying to do it. We have huge disparities between how different countries are organizing things. Some of them appear to be more successful than others, whatever. But what we seem to be advocating in all of the groups, as far as I can see, certainly most of the groups, is an international entity, body. The United Nations is that an appropriate body? But how do we get, this is the viability that has been spoken of, how do we get from the perspective that 99% of the time we have national governments, but 1% of the time, the percentage that we're in now, we have an international entity where data laws change, that we're no longer in the old system, we're in the new. Things are completely different, so that we can work the system for us, for people with the gold medal, rather than for banks or whoever it is when we're in the normal state.
Agreed. Any of our
and I would like to complete this idea and say that we really this is our chance for all of us, because there was never before a common enemy. There were countries fighting between each other, but now we have one global enemy, and now we can be more united than we were before. And from other hand, we need to tell people the hard truth that it's not going to end in a month. It's not going to end in 2 or 3 months. This is new reality. We need to adjust to this new reality. And that's how it's going to be for a while. And also we don't need to scare people. What we also discussed in our focus group, we don't need to scare people. What media is doing now, we need to give people hope, and we need to show our efforts that we are fighting this global issue in united front, and a lot of effort is there. And if we will show that the best of us is fighting this fight, then other people will have more faith that everything will turn out in a good way.
Yes, thank you for that, Rhinus. And I think that really builds very well on the point that was made earlier by one of the groups, that perhaps we need to learn how to live with this now, rather than trying to see how to end it or how to fight it, because perhaps living in the here and now and acknowledging the presence of this common enemy will actually enable us to find better solutions, both for the present and also for the future. And you also picked up on another point that was mentioned by the groups earlier, that it's no use frightening people. Yes, again, we do need to acknowledge what is out there to behave responsibly and appropriately. However, putting people in the fear mode might actually have negative repercussions, not only on people's mental health, but also, going into survival mode, and that is quite counterproductive also for creative thinking. Yeah. Any comments by our other speakers in terms of the ideas that have been put forward? Any of the ideas perhaps stand out as more appealing than the others to you?
Hi, it's okay.
Dr. Barbara, yes, thank you.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much. I joined the breakout session too, actually, to learn a bit more on this, because it was so enlightening. I really enjoyed the independent thinking which Edward de Bono is always telling us about. So I think this is so important. We keep thinking inside the box all the time. Myself as a virologist, I am always thinking of the virus and the way of doing a barrier between the human and the virus itself, and how long can this keep going on? Will it keep going on until we get the vaccine, until we get herd immunity? When will this happen? But from these sessions, I really learned a lot about how people can mobilize platforms, how we can make things work out to our favor. We know there are procurement problems everywhere with PPEs and so on. And we have to share this and see how we can mobilize all these platforms and create things. So I like the COVID way of saying all the challenges, we have the opportunities, we have on. Another important factor which I really enjoyed, and I think I would try to implement this, is the open source information, which I think is so important. The portal, the think tank, which was mentioned in the presentation, because we can understand that there are people at home who are fearful. There are people who have developed the mental disturbance because of the fear they are getting. And if we can really integrate ourselves through this portal with the community in general, we can have further discussions, we can get further ideas, and at the same time allay the anxiety and fear which people are having, and keep everyone informed and educated on the best way. We humans are intelligent, we have thinking. The virus cannot think in any way. We are happy we have Edward and giving us all these innovative ideas. The virus has nothing of this. It is true, it's a very microscopic or super microscopic bug which is infecting us, but we can, with our intelligence and our way of thinking, try to overcome this problem in the long term.
Thank you very much. That is an excellent point, and I agree completely. I always say to our students and in the events that I participate in, that we all have the capacity to think. unfortunately, not everybody does so as effectively as one could, because not everybody has been trained to think. So although we have the capacity, thinking is a skill just like anything else, and we need to learn how to think, how to, so there are methods, including Edward de Bono's thinking methods, which some of you have sampled a little bit today. But we also need to develop, besides the creative thinking, also the critical thinking. So because we all have so much information at hand coming from all sources and from all directions, I think we also need to be very careful that we learn how to think critically in order to make sense of the information that we are bombarded with before reacting and responding.
Yes, this brings us back to one point. We should have also alternative crisis teams. They work on opposite of the teams, that they come up with new ideas and push the crisis teams in the right way. Yeah. So we have to ask every time, is the way what we are going, is it right, or have we another alternative? And if only one group in a crisis team is working and there's no input from outside, they have maybe tons of view.
Yeah, thank you, Seb. We haven't heard from 3 of our panelists yet, so I'd like to perhaps pose a question to Safa. I've just mentioned the importance of learning how to think, but one, of course, needs to learn the things as well. And I know that you are coming from the education sector. So can you perhaps give us your thoughts on what has taken place today in terms of the ideas that were generated and any additional insights that you would like to share?
Actually, I really like that almost each and every idea was visionary and or viable. And each has a sense of one of the 6 value models. So maybe having all this network from different backgrounds of experts from different areas of the globe made this so flexible umbrella of ideas that would be able to have this globalized thoughts and would be easily localized to fit each and every country's local context. So I think maybe most of them were about sharing stuff, sharing info, having an independent body that would control and monitor the shared data about everything. But this would be really localized in a way that saves the country's own interests in this global crisis that's really affecting each and every one of us. So maybe those thinking skills being practiced in different backgrounds, like me from education, Dr. Reyes from politics or so, maybe we're sharing not only the same ambition and the same, let's say, the power of this new COVID-19 thing affecting all of our countries, but maybe sharing the hope. And that's the sense I am touching here. And that's what we need to take back to our countries. Like the one who actually mentioned, we don't need to have red hats involving or getting into the white hats. It's about facts plus hope. If we have to add some red hats to any of those ideas, it would be the sense of hope, working to a better future, preparing to live with this in a better way. So I'm really thankful to be learning here today.
Thank you very much, Safa. Naeeb, you are a senior consultant in the digital economy. How do you see what we have been discussing today perhaps playing out in that economy? Or how can the digital economy contribute perhaps to the development and implementation of some of these ideas? Naeeb, are you here? Have we lost him?
His microphone is muted.
Is he? He can unmute. I can't see him.
Maybe you can guide him, Leonie, because he had an issue with it in our group as well.
Okay.
So tech support here. I've unmuted his microphone, but he's remuted. He may be having audio trouble. I'm not sure. I'll try and send him a message and see if I can communicate with him that way.
Can you perhaps ask him to leave the...
Hello, do you hear me?
Oh, yes. We can hear you now. Okay.
Okay. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed this afternoon with all of you. I think, since 8 years, we know a lot of innovation in different countries. Sometimes we talk about science park, innovation, etc. And everybody is thinking about innovation and creativity. And I'm taking the O from COVID, the O, as an opportunity. And I think we have to create a tradition for young people to create a kind of lab coffee, for example, every once a month or once 6 months, where all of these young people without limit, I like the independent thinking. It means without limit. But in every country, we find out some association who are doing very good job in this time. Drones, artificial intelligence, robotics, lot of countries with a minimum of infrastructure, they do a lot of good things. But what we miss is this collective intelligence. A lot of things are done in different countries, but I am thinking about an umbrella where we can, set up a virtual, I don't know, innovation-oriented healthcare cluster where people could meet and share idea. And for that, we need maybe an independent institution who cover all those good ideas. But for sure, we need to create a tradition for that. And the tradition can be step by step somehow. Yes, this is the point.
Yep, okay.
Actually, I would like to add to this that if countries could unlock intellectual properties for technologies and share them like open source, then that would really boost our community to rise up these technology startups. And probably we would have new technologies in much faster time than we do now, because a lot of technologies are there. They're just locked by intellectual property rights. And I believe that in this time, there shouldn't be someone who is holding these rights. We just need to talk to the industry and unlock these intellectual property rights.
Agreed. Well, actually, at this during this COVID pandemic, we have been seeing organizations to be much more generous with their with what is usually considered to be their IP, their belongings. You know, they have been sharing resources with the general public. So perhaps this is really the way to go. But on this topic of technology, I'd like to ask Professor Warwick what he thinks the role of artificial intelligence and robots and cyborgs could be in the present and future, the current COVID situation and perhaps post-COVID. Professor Warwick.
Yeah, cyborgs, I'm not so sure. There's not an immediate answer, but I think with artificial intelligence, clearly, it doesn't seem to be playing much of a role, whereas I think it could. One of the big advantages of AI is its predictive capabilities. And yet, because of the way data is not being made available globally, it's back to that global point, so we don't really get a chance to use it. We might do when we're getting into the recovery stage, when you're looking at individual cases reappearing. I think 1 or 2 countries are seeing something of that now, which is different to the stage we're in now. So when it started, 1 or 2 people were spreading. If we could have used AI then to predict what is going to happen, but it needs monitoring, it needs tracking coming in. AI is only, just like humans, is only as good as the information, the data that is given to operate on. And we have a lot of data. This is, I don't know, is it a white hat? It's a good point now. We have lots of data, we have lots of information, but we're simply not using it at the moment. And until we can use it and use it legally, then we can really bring AI into play. And the predictive capabilities, we can, I think the speak of just before, saying about how we're intelligent as humans. Well, we can outthink it. We can beat it. We can get one step ahead of it, which at the moment, I think we can't, because we're using, you know, the 99% of the time laws which we're stuck with.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I'm conscious of time. We need to wrap up very soon, but I do have one more speaker whom I deliberately left until the end before asking her a question. Gulfen?
No.
Gulfen is an expert in political communication. And I mean, ultimately, it is all about communication, isn't it? So it's, I mean, to me, it's easy to come up with ideas because it's part of what I do on an everyday basis. It's part of what I teach on an everyday basis. You all had a go at the generation of ideas, and in just an hour, you all did a really, really good job. Of course, the ideas need to be further developed before they can be implemented, but still, they need to be communicated. There needs to be this political communication. So if I may perhaps close this expert panel discussion with your take on this, with your perhaps views and advice, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. What is interesting is now all the borders are closed. So the only global thing is the virus itself traveling everywhere. So the thing is, I'm from one point of view, I'm happy with the outcome of the focus groups, because even if all the borders are closed now, there are lots of suggestions for some international solutions, like deploying a set of UN rules for pandemic, or some law changes concerning the data protection. But on the other hand, there are also some suggestions which I find very valuable about creating some fearless citizen movements. Because as far as I can see, fear, as I guess discussed in many of the focus group, is one of the points together with the fake news or data check or fact check things. So coming in the, I think in the future, let me say, this kind of communication, but the communication of the politicians as well as the countries will be very crucial, because this pandemic is global, but now we're trying to do it by, nothing is acted globally. So we shouldn't let this pandemic and the unique idea of the globalization, which is a part of which can play a role in the future overcoming the economical problems as well. So I guess empowering the people, I think it was the fourth group, independent thinking, which has suggested creating fearless global citizen movement, because I think empowering the people will maybe one of the greatest outcomes of this pandemic. And we should also focus on the solidarity creating in different countries, and as well as fighting, maybe we haven't talked about it in the focus group, but the communication, especially the communication of the politicians, is so important nowadays, not to create extra xenophobic movements. So we should, while communicating, we should empower people, we should empower citizens, and not some new xenophobic ideas, or not some new popularist ideas. So
thank you very much. Thank you for your insights. And I think on this note, I would like to bring this panel discussion to a close, because we are just about to run out of time. I would like to take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you for being here, for sharing your ideas, for being willing to generate new ideas and new solutions for the pandemic. The best ideas will now be put into communicatable form by the conference team and will be shared in through appropriate channels. Thank you very much to Professor Edward de Bono and Justine and also Sepp Hartinger, who are the core team for this conference. And I would now like to hand over to Justine because she'd just like to say a few final remarks. And before that, if any of you would like to know more about the Edward de Bono thinking methods, I invite you to visit the websites of or contact De Bono Thinking Systems and the Edward de Bono Institute at the University of Malta. So the former does most of the commercial training aspect of the De Bono thinking methods, and we are at the university, so we approach things from a more academic perspective. Thank you all. Justine, over to you.
Thank you, Leonie. That was excellent. Thank you for that. The same here. I thank everyone, especially on behalf of De Bono. And I must say that I'm very happy with the result of the conference, especially this being the first virtual conference for Palace of New Thinking. Dr. De Bono has actually watched all the conference and he's very, very happy with the results. So thank you all. Also, we can see that the participation has been consistent throughout the whole time, as well as having some feedback now from the public while we are streaming live. So I would just like to inform all participants that they will all receive certificates of participation from Palace of New Thinking, and that Palace of New Thinking will now work with its, with its network. I believe also EAPC, Mr. Sepp Hartinger, will do the same thing in his power to try implement the new ideas that have come out of today's conference. So I thank you all again. It's been really great, overwhelmingly great. And we're just going to now finish off the conference with a nice video that we have that has been recorded, and Dr. Edward de Bono's basically words of wisdom to all. So thank you all. Thank you very much.
Intelligence means that the way you use your starting points is correct. But if your starting points are different, maybe different values, different situations, different perceptions, all these may be different or wrong, and your use of them may be correct, which is intelligence, but then you believe your intelligence goes above anything, and that's rubbish. Curiosity is one particular form of creativity, which means we're looking at this situation. Is there any other way we could look at it, or how can we extend it? And the motivation for doing it is creative. Creativity is a different way of looking at something, a different way of doing things. So in a way, people can say you're challenging the existing way of looking at things, the existing way of doing things. It's looking at something which is well established, and let's challenge it. Maybe we could look at it differently. That's not the purpose of creativity. The purpose of creativity is to produce something new, not to destroy or change what is there. Description is different from thinking. You can describe something, it's philosophy, yes, but thinking is producing something new or a new way of looking at something. Bonding is thinking to create value. The whole point of thinking is to find and use good values, or to change bad values. So values is key. And if the values are wrong to start with, no matter how good your thinking is, the answer will be wrong as well. We would reduce arguments, disputes, wars, and so on by being able to see the other person's point of view. We could generate new ideas and new things. But thinking is a rather important aspect which we tend to neglect completely.